Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where I talk with CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of companies and organizations like YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingTree, OpenTable, Act Software, and many more. I'm also the co-founder of Rise25, where we connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. And I'm excited today because my guest is Russ Rosenzweig. He's the founder of Roundtable Group, which he founded while serving as a senior at Northwestern University. And it's not often you get to talk to someone who invents an industry that generates hundreds of millions of dollars, but that's effectively what he did. Expert, witness, search, and referral, which is a new industry that he basically invented with that company, grew it up, scaled it up, sold it to a publicly traded company, bought the company back a couple of years ago, and he's back again serving as CEO. And he's also a really seasoned hand and expert mediator. He's really good at resolving sticky business disputes. No doubt has something to do with the work that he's been doing over the years. So we're going to ask him about that as well. But first, before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by my company, Rise25 Media. And our mission through Rise25 is really to help you to connect and deepen relationships with your best referral partners, customers, strategic partners, the people that fulfill you, that light you up, that excite you. We do that through our Done For You podcast and content marketing solution. I firmly believe it's one of the best things I've done, start a podcast, and I am an evangelist. I know that we can only touch so many people, but I tell everyone I talk to, that you should do it. So if you want to learn more about that, go to rise25media.com. And now I get to benefit because I get to talk to a very smart guy, Mr. Russ Rosenzweig. Before we do that, though, I do want to mention that our mutual friend and a client of ours, Alexi Cashin, CEO of Ellen Tenney Imports, introduced us, and she's also the founder of the Alexi Cashin podcast. So I do want to give her a shout out. Go check out, if you're interested in wine especially, go check out the Alexi Cashin podcast. But Russ, tell me a little bit about, you were a senior in college and you start this business that ends up being really successful in basically inventing an industry. You weren't a lawyer, you weren't a practicing lawyer, and you weren't a practicing expert as far as I know, but you saw an opening. You saw that there was a need to help people to connect with experts and expert witnesses. And where did that come about? How did you come up with the idea?
Hey, John, it's an honor to be here. It's a fun little story because my senior year in college was a recession year. It was 92, 93. It was the famous George Bush Sr. It's the economy stupid year. And the kind of funny part is Roundtable Group was really, the idea was supposed to be a plan B, just in case my partners and I couldn't get a real job. And, I had this dream of becoming a management consultant at a prestigious firm. And it was just very difficult during that recession year to get such a job. I did miraculously, in the 11th hour, get hired by Price Waterhouse and had a couple of excellent years in the management consulting world.
And you were doing Roundtable Group secretly on the side during this time?
It was a little kind of secret side venture because I always was puzzled. Like, I just couldn't believe, John, that, Price Waterhouse was billing me out at like $400 an hour.
Wow.
And, I was 22 and knew nothing. And, I was making a nice salary, like $33,000 a year, which was more than I thought I'd ever make in my whole life.
Nice
but,
margin.
That margin,
nice margin. Yeah.
right? I just couldn't stop thinking about the margin. And, I had this idea, what if we could create our own consulting firm? Not with people like me, because I'm no expert, but my professors at Northwestern, my professors at University of Chicago, where I went to business school a year later, like these I thought were truly, truly brilliant experts. And wouldn't it be fun to just like create a virtual consulting firm that consisted entirely of professors? That was really the spark of the roundtable group idea during my senior year.
Got it. Got it. And so at the same time, the economy is not doing well, and you do get this job, but you're working on this project on the side. At what point do you decide that you're going to go full time, and what inspired that?
We took about 3 years before we went full time. And during the 3 years, I was busy with a day job at Price Waterhouse. And, this was like an evening and weekend sort of passion in which my colleagues and I were sort of single-mindedly focused on recruiting professors. That's really all I did when I wasn't working at Price Waterhouse. And it involved emails, John, because email was not yet mainstream. But academics were the first to be on
Right.
emails. And we were
Yeah.
able to, through, just a lot of hard work and sleuthing and research, we basically got the names and emails of, well, pretty much every professor in the country. And we sent them emails just like telling them that they're a rock star in the field and rock stars should have business managers. And we would like to be their business manager to try to find them interesting and lucrative gigs as a complement to their teaching and research. And most of them said yes. So by the end of
So
the 3 years,
there probably wasn't a lot of competition in the inbox back then, and not many people reaching out to these professors saying, what kinds of responses did you get from people when you said this?
well, that's so true, John. If people can remember 25 years ago, you actually like looked forward to getting an email. There was like no such thing as spam. And,
Yeah.
faculty members found it to be a novel and interesting invitation. And, there's no downside. And professors don't typically make millions of dollars a year. So having like a manager that can find them interesting and lucrative side gigs was appealing to them. And, when we got like 10,000 professors saying yes, that's when we said, okay, time to quit the day job and to do this full time.
Of course, there's two sides of the coin. You got to get the supply, but there's also the demand side, right? So then did you go out to litigators and law firms and say, who do you need? You need an expert in this, that, or the other thing. I've got them for you. How did that side work?
Not really, John. Our success is truly accidental. We kind of forgot to write a business plan and a marketing plan. And right after we quit, we kind of realized, whoops, we only have the supply side and no demand. And it took actually another 2 to 3 years. And we almost had to close it down and go out of business because we were running out of money fast. But it was like miraculous that litigators started calling us because we got a little press. We were in the New York Times, we were in the Wall Street Journal, we were in the Chicago Tribune. It was, an unusual company, consulting firm of professors. And when lawyers kind of heard about it, our phones started ringing with requests for expert witnesses. And that was our light bulb, aha, duh moment that we should be in the expert witness business.
Got it. Got it. And, I practiced law for many years, and I remember in the law firms I worked in at the time, maybe even to this day, there were these volumes that experts would pay to be in. And, lawyers and paralegals would look through looking for an expert in these different publications that the law firm had to pay for. And that was kind of like is that the model that you eventually ended up disrupting?
There wasn't really a true precedent for what we became and ended up doing. Basically, top litigators constantly need expert witnesses. And, you can lose a trial, John, if you get the wrong expert, if you make a mistake. And most great litigators are very brilliant and thorough and rigorous people. But what I found is that wasn't always the case when it came to finding expert witnesses. It's just very time consuming. It's very inefficient for a lawyer to spend her time doing that. So normally they would just ask around at the firm, like, who do we know? Who'd we use last time? There wasn't even Google yet, but when Google came about, that became even more time consuming because you'd get 3 million pages when you type in a search term. And so, like this expert selection piece is just so critically important to the outcome of a case. So we really just decided to do it the old fashioned way, just hard work. When a lawyer needed an expert, they'd call us. Most of my colleagues over time, were our lawyers, and we became skilled at reading complaints, reading patents, just having a good old 30 to 45-minute conversation with a lawyer, brainstorming what's the ideal credentials of the perfect expert, really understanding the nuances of the expert needs. And then we, over a quarter century, developed the databases and the research capabilities to be able to find and even vet and help a lawyer assess ideal expert candidates. And that became the service we provided.
Right. Now, I know when I was a senior in college, 22 years old, and if you put me on the phone with a litigator who's got a big case, they're going to trial, I probably would have just completely melted under the pressure. And I know you went and got your MBA, so that probably helped, gave you a little bit of confidence. But and by the way, while you're getting your MBA at University of Chicago, you're building the business up to 0, 1 million, 2 million a year. How did you start selling to this market of litigators when by this point you're probably 24, 25 years old? You've got an MBA, right? So you got a graduate degree. But how do you start selling to a community that you're not a part of?
Yeah, so that's also a surprising little story. When I told you, John, about how we recruited all those professors, so now fast forward 5 years, we had this light bulb aha moment, like lawyers. We are now officially in the expert witness business. And now it's like 1997, 98. Email was starting to become more mainstream. The web had been invented. And with a lot of hard work, we were able to just kind of repeat that process we did with the professors. We were able to find the names of thousands of lawyers, litigators particularly, at specifically targeted firms. And we were able to figure out their email addresses, phone numbers. And, by this time we had done a few successful engagements with, 20 or 30 of the top law firms. So we were able to start introducing ourselves, with some scale to many other lawyers at each firm. Hey, we've had the pleasure of working with some of your partners and associates on expert witness research. And, it would just be a pleasure to work with you too. Do you have any matters in which you need experts? And it just, that marketing sort of business development channel was back then very, very successful and fast. It was just really easy to reply to an email and, articulate details about a new case and get on the phone and discuss the matter in depth. And, I started hiring lawyers who just didn't want to practice law anymore, but loved the idea of becoming professional expert witness researchers and finders. And it just became very fun and enjoyable work, John. Like it was, each assignment was interesting and significant and fun and challenging. And we were good at it. We actually, succeeded most of the time at locating and vetting and recommending experts.
Now, you're growing it, you're scaling it up. This is in the late 90s and 2000. I wanted to ask you about, you survived a few recessions and you founded it going into, obviously, the first recession. This is talking the mid 90s, 93, 94, when the economy was just very sluggish. Bill Clinton gets elected. George Bush doesn't get reelected. And so it's around that time period. Now we're recording this in late April of 2020. Coronavirus pandemic is unfolding. Everyone's still sheltered in place in case you're listening to this in the future. But I wanted to ask you, what is the market like now, and what's your approach to managing the business? Because we haven't gotten to it there yet, but you did step away from the business for a while. You sold and then you came back. But now managing the business, what is it like going into this recession compared to the other recessions you've been through previously?
Well, we've been through a lot of crises over 25 years and weathered them all pretty well. Usually litigation is one of the few areas that does well in most recessions. But we've seen nothing ever, obviously, like COVID-19. These are just strange, surreal times. And, we have just this real compassion for the state of the world right now. And there's a lot of people in need. And, first and foremost, we're really focusing our energies on trying to help. We're in a very relatively fortunate position, and we're able to secure things like masks from our university connections around the world and send them to clients and send them to healthcare workers. On the business side, we feel just kind of strangely fortunate because, we've been virtual for 25 years, John. Our whole model since 1993 was skilled people working, all of them from home. We're kind of like, most of us are lawyers and introverts and don't leave the house much anyway. So strangely, the quarantine does not really affect our business that much. The second thing I've noticed is, most of our clients are at the sort of upper echelons of top tier law firms and boutique firms working on very significant litigations. And, a lot of them kind of half jokingly, as far as I can tell, John, their response to the crisis is, working even more enthusiastically from home. The phone hasn't really stopped ringing. There's been a little bit of a slowdown, call it 10% less than usual, which is to be expected, better than expected. But the third observation is just like, unfortunately, in a way, good for us, but maybe unfortunately for the world, litigation seems to be on people's mind in the COVID context. When the world returns to normal, we're frankly expecting, fortunately or unfortunately, to be busier than ever.
Mm-hmm. And you've been around the block a lot when it comes to managing, running a business, being an entrepreneur for many years. What advice do you have for businesses out there right now that are, weren't fortunate like you to be virtual for as many years as you have? And by the way, I feel the same way. I feel so incredibly fortunate because our business is the same way. Our whole team's virtual. We found that the phone hasn't stopped ringing, in part because of what we do, and in part because we can continue to do it. So I feel so fortunate as well and grateful. But what are your thoughts on that for businesses that do need to innovate and maybe even completely pivot the business right now?
Well, this is our 25th anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
Thanks, man. We've been like pre-COVID-19, like thinking strategically about what I like to call a quarter century plan. A lot of companies think in monthly, think in terms of quarterly earnings or, annual plans. And we're actually working on a 25-year plan. Have been enthusiastically focused on, what do we want to be like on our 50th anniversary? And we're just thinking just in terms of, far out innovations, integrating artificial intelligence into our research processes, just thinking about how to innovate this whole expert witness industry, which has grown a lot. I mean, what we did kind of, how do I say, sparked a lot of competitive entry. And our little brand new industry is now like probably nearly 200 million in terms of quite a few sort of expert witness providers.
And what was that like? I mean, they say flatter, what is it? Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but in business,
right.
you don't really want competitors. You want no competitors. But what has that been like when you had a lot of other Me Too copycat firms that are coming along?
There have been pros and cons to it. The main pro to competitive entry for us was that lawyers, just before we came along, just like the way they found experts was on their own. Who do we know? Who did we use last time? Maybe ask an associate or a paralegal to help. Like there was no notion of a third party to outsource the expert witness search. So the first thing that happened when we got competitive entry is what's the phrase? All oceans, all ships rose. Because
Rising tide. Yeah, we named our business after that. A rising tide lifts all boats.
Rising tide lifts all boats. And with competitive entry, lawyers began to realize, wow, I should outsource this to somebody. I had no idea it was an industry. I just thought it was like this guy Russ and his roundtable out there. So competitive entry initially was very helpful. More recently, I have mixed emotions about it. A few of the latest entries into the industry are private equity backed and have extremely expensive infrastructure with flashy offices on Times Square, etc. And they're in the habit of just making experts very expensive. Experts themselves aren't the cheapest purchase in the world, especially world-class talent. But if you add $200, $300, $400, $500 an hour to what an expert wants, which some of our competitors are doing, it's just, not palatable. Clients don't appreciate it. And when they think that it's too expensive, they kind of imagine that the whole industry operates like that. And so, it's always a double-edged sword with competitive entry.
Yeah. And did you find that you hear about this sometimes before a private equity firm goes into a market like that or starts a new business, that they start putting out feelers? Either they approach you about an acquisition or stealthily they come in trying to scope you out. Have you experienced that at all over the years?
Yeah, I kind of am embarrassed to be considered something of a grandfatherly figure now in the industry.
That's a weird position because then, if someone's approaching you, it could be flattery, but it could also be they're trying to get competitive intelligence. So how do you know the difference?
Quite right. They all called me for my advice and guidance, but that was before I bought Roundtable Group back. So I was, arguably in a pretty good, unbiased position.
Yeah,
had an understanding of the industry.
You could charge them for your expertise
and its growth, and probably, unfortunately, I gave them too much good advice, especially now that I'm back in the game.
Right. Let's talk about that. So you end up selling the business around 2010. How did that come about? Why did you make the decision to sell?
Yeah, so speaking of recessions, this all went down in 08, 09, because it takes a little while to consummate a transaction. So with that recession, that some call it the Great Recession, in 08, again, litigation isn't as affected as many industries are. It actually was, though, at that time, but, not as bad as many others had it. And we had decided that, what, with all these competitors, flattering competitors in the industry now, our mantra for that last recession was basically acquire or be acquired. And I spent most of my time, in 08 and 09, doing due diligence on the few competitors that had entered the industry, and was actually pretty close to, what would we call it, a roll-up of the expert witness industry. And then, before I can kind of execute on that, Thomson Reuters, my beloved favorite company in the world, called us and asked if we wanted to be acquired. And they kind of mentioned a number. And then I sort of accidentally said, "Okay, sold." and,
I guess you're okay with the number then.
Played out. Yeah, we were okay with the number. Sell high and buy back low, John. That's my life message for fellow entrepreneurs.
Which is what ended up happening. So you leave the game for about 9 years, and then you have an opportunity to acquire the business back at less than you bought it for, right? How did that come about?
Yeah, I'm kind of not
It's less than you sold
allowed
it
to
for.
disclose the exact details due to NDAs.
Sure.
But yeah, let's just say sell high, buy back low is definitely my life's message.
Got it. But how did you come to acquire the business that you'd sold 9 years earlier? Why? And what are you seeking to achieve this second time around?
Well, frankly, I missed it, John. I had, involved myself in a variety of pretty exciting activities, including this sort of mediation role with fellow entrepreneurs who are fighting with each other. I dabbled in Israeli-Palestinian peace negotiations. I worked in litigation finance. I worked in a variety of fields, and it was fun and enjoyable, but nothing was quite like my beloved Roundtable Group. I really missed it. And I kind of had the good sense to sort of stay in touch with Thomson Reuters and my former employees. And, I just kind of sensed an opportunity. I kind of called over there to check in and see how everything's going. And, by frankly miracle, they were going through a period of divestment. They really wanted to be a data company and, had a particular area of focus and, asked me if I wanted to buy my baby back. And, I basically got the old band back together, my same two beloved co-founding partners from the original Roundtable Group 1.0. And we decided all three of us kind of missed it and had a very enjoyable sort of negotiation and due diligence with them. Quick little side note is, big companies like Thomson Reuters are very skilled at due diligence when they buy companies. And it's a very, very rigorous process that an entrepreneur has to go through if being bought by a publicly traded Fortune 500 company. And so when the coin got flipped and it was our turn to buy them, I told them, listen, guys, we have a very thorough and rigorous due diligence process. Basically, we just hand you over all the questions that you asked us 9 years ago. We had a very fun and enjoyable negotiation that went quickly.
That's funny. And what's it been like being back with your co-founders after a decade apart?
It's been heavenly, John, and there's just been nothing like it. I can't even sleep due to excitement. And when I wake up in the morning and there are problems to solve, I just get on my knees and in gratitude to actually have some nice problems to solve once again. And we spent the last several months kind of, call it landing the plane. And taking over the leadership and, kind of honing and refining and getting Roundtable Group really ready for our next 25 years. And just as that was about to happen, COVID-19 hit. So very interesting times for us all, for sure.
Yeah, for many businesses. I want to ask you a bit about the mediation, which you mentioned, something that I don't know if you'd call it a profession or if it was more of like a passion. But that's how we met. Was I heard you came very highly recommended by others for your skill in helping entrepreneurs and executives with sticky disputes. We'll put it that way. So I wanted to ask you about that. What is your approach and what is your philosophy? Because for myself, when I was a litigator and I helped parties with litigation, there's often incredible amounts of emotion involved, and it's not easy to be a mediator. It's a very hard job. There's so many different levers to pull. It's not, if you watch like TV crime dramas or you see judges on TV or something. It's never that simple. You have to work with a lot of different emotions, a lot of different psychology, and oftentimes these are things that have been boiling for years. So talk a little bit about your approach and how you developed this skill set, because that's not an easy skill set, especially for someone who didn't practice for many years as a litigator.
Yeah, thanks for asking, John. I think this also is kind of an accidental skill set that I developed. First of all, over 25 years in a particular industry, I feel like I've kind of been through nearly everything, from the starting of a new venture to nearly failing, running out of money, fast growth. Fast growth that led to decline during a recession and then kind of restarting and, looking into buying companies and then getting acquired and then buying companies after being acquired and buying it back. And, me and my partners, frankly, have been through every imaginable emotion in the course of all these years of doing business. So I have just this experience that fellow entrepreneurs who would find useful, having just been through so many things. But second, my industry, just every week, John, for week after week, month after month, year after year, for a quarter century, my life's work is being involved in disputes. And, every day we get 20 plus more requests for experts about a complex dispute. And I have a front row. I see how the disputes originated. I see how the dispute evolves. I get to participate sometimes in attempts to settle the dispute. And then I see how things wind up if it goes to trial. And, my kind of main insight from all this is, do not go to court because,
No kidding.
litigation is just so stressful.
Yeah.
And not many people win in a litigation, except for maybe the lawyers and, of course, the beloved expert witnesses. The disputants don't win. And, I am passionate about entrepreneurship. I'm deeply, deeply committed to the spirit of entrepreneurship. And my social circles are with entrepreneurs. And, it's inevitable for entrepreneurs to have a disagreement. And what I found, John, is that, the moment two partners in a dispute get a lawyer, it's game over. There's this phrase, lawyer up. As soon as that happens, just trust usually is lost and it really does turn into a dispute. So there's this window of time when a dispute is first beginning to brew. That you need a different, you really want to resolve it before anybody lawyers up. And there aren't many people that can help in this regard. You can't really go to a therapist because they don't have the business experience. Lawyers themselves, need to work for a side. There's no sort of coaching to my knowledge, that's available to help resolve disputes before they become too big. So that's kind of my accidental skill set, because I'm just really passionate about helping fellow entrepreneurs just resolve disputes and, just come to an amicable conclusion and what I like to call hug it out at the end. And I'm just very passionate about trying to get to that outcome before it turns into a legal dispute.
Right. Now, you had, before we wrap things up, I want to ask about one other business, which I know you and I talked about previous time we talked, which was managing expert witnesses, right? That was the other business that you had. Do you want to talk a little bit about that one?
Sure, a little bit. Yeah, that's one of the things I did during what I like to call my Napoleonic exile from the expert witness industry. Many of the experts that joined Roundtable Group in the early years, in our early years, as I mentioned, we only worked with professors. And, fast forward to today's times, a lot of those professors, like, how do I say, really love me because I helped catalyze their expert witness careers.
Hmm.
Many of them just didn't even know what that was until they got a call from me in Roundtable Group. And, over the years, they've done quite a lot of engagements now. And they've also become, for the most part, very significant in their field. A lot of those early professors have now become deans and department chairs and provosts and even university presidents in a couple of cases. And, when you reach that kind of a stature, it's, a lot of experts at this level still enjoy serving as an expert witness. But, when the conversation turns towards things like billing rates and retainers and contracts and collecting on invoices, it's, a little bit, what's the word? Beneath the station of the world's top experts to even be involved in negotiating their rates and collecting on invoices and things of that nature. So I've had the very exciting good fortune of just having a lot of friends in the professorial circles who basically use me as a kind of an agent or manager or business manager, the way a rock star would typically have a business manager. And that's been a very enjoyable sort of complementary line of work to our sort of core expert witness business.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. Well, I know we're running out of time, and so I want to wrap things up with the question I always ask, which is, Russ, let's pretend we're at an awards banquet, much like the Oscars and the Emmys, and you're receiving an award for lifetime achievement for everything you've done up until this point. And what we all want to know is, who do you thank? Who, in addition to family and friends, of course, but who else? Who are the business partners? Who are the mentors? Who are the friends? Who are the expert witnesses? Who are the litigators? Who are the business partners? Who are the people that you would acknowledge in your remarks?
Yeah, I mean, beyond family and friends who have just been so incredibly supportive through the highs and the lows, especially my parents, my wife, Lucy. First and foremost on the list would be my amazing business partners, Bob and Chris, for 27 years now. We've just been through everything together, and we still love working together and still love this business. And it's just like, without the three of us, just none of this could have happened. We've also been very blessed to have colleagues. We've had this unusually good hiring success. Most of the roundtablers are with us 10 to 20 plus years. And people don't usually leave once they join us here. And the true magic of our company is, really rests with our colleagues. Clients, of course, it's like a dream come true being able to work with the premier litigators at world-class firms. Many of them took a chance with us, in 1997 and said, sure, why not? Let's see what you could do. And that combined with our suppliers, the experts and professors, where it all started, it's like a double blessing because we get to work with brilliant clients who work on some of the most significant disputes of our time. And our job is to find them, world-class elite professors and other experts who themselves are joyful to work with. And maybe one last category I would add in terms of gratitude is I actually do want to thank our competitors. We actually kind of all know each other, we respect each other, and it's, that competitive entry that turned us from, merely a $30 million company into, a couple of $100 million industry, and really did, lift that tide, which lifted all the ships. And it's good work. It's like we together as a group in this industry feel like we have a little bit of a higher calling than most businesses, at least in my mind. We feel like we're, sort of serving justice. And engaged in just making sure that the best and most qualified expert witness is on the stand, because otherwise, justice might not be served. So, that's kind of the immediate list that comes to mind for thanking.
That's a great way to look at it. Yeah, honestly, that'll really drive you forward and really motivate you. Well, Russ, this has been great. Roundtable Group is the name of the company. And where can people go to learn more about you or connect with you or learn more about the various different initiatives you're involved in?
They should go to roundtablegroup.com or connect with me on LinkedIn, Russ Rosenzweig. I'm unusually extroverted and enjoy connecting with fellow entrepreneurs. So I look forward to getting to know some people in your community, John.
Great. And that's Russ, RussRoSenzweig, correct?
Yes.
Got it. Okay, good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Russ.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
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 And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.